Hello, everyone. My name is Becky Robinson. I'm so glad you're joining us today. Welcome to this next webinar in the series with Bonnie Marcus. Hi, Bonnie.
Hi, how are you?
I'm doing well, thank you. It looks like our participants are coming into the webinar. Welcome, everyone. We're so glad to have you. As you get settled, I hope you'll take a moment to find the chat panel. We would love to use this chat throughout today's webinar. So we hope you'll take a moment and use the drop-down menu to select all panelists and attendees because we want all of our conversation to be shared with everyone in the meeting. So take a moment to find the chat panel. Select all panelists and attendees and let us know where you are calling in from today. If you happen to be calling in from beautiful sunny California like Bonnie, you are amongst the lucky ones on this January day. I am calling in from Michigan. Looks like we have some folks in Iowa and Nebraska and Colorado, so welcome to you. Again, I would encourage you to select all panelists and attendees. We've found that an unintended consequence of these webinars is sometimes old friends see each other and they can say hello to one another. That happened on one of my last webinars, so we would love to hear from you.
It's sunny in Pennsylvania, I see.
It is. I can't see outside at the moment, but I don't think it's sunny in Michigan today. Welcome to those of you in Canada. We're so thrilled that you've chosen to invest some time with us today. So some technical considerations. We are recording today's event. We do not have any slides. And we're also broadcasting live to Facebook. So if you're interested in immediately sharing this content with others, we would invite you to go to Facebook, find my company page on Facebook, Weaving Influence, and you can immediately share this live stream to invite your friends to participate with us. Isn't that so fun? So if you want to take a second to do that, we're not going to dive into the content just yet. You're welcome to share this video live now or later. We will send you a link to the recording on YouTube so that you can watch it again, remind yourself of the important insights that you gained, and share it with others. So again, welcome to all of you. We're going to get started in just a few moments, and I'd love to tell you just a little bit about Bonnie. Now, really quickly, and because I'm curious, if you've attended a previous webinar in this Women's Empowerment series, would you take a quick moment and type yes in the chat? We'd love to know if we have folks who are attending these webinars again and again with us. So it looks like I see a few yeses coming in. Thanks to those of you who are letting us know that you've been participating in the series. In case you're curious, we do have an upcoming webinar in the series coming on March 10th at 1 p.m. Eastern. And when we send our follow-up email, we will include a link so that you can sign up for that one. I know you're excited about that one, Bonnie.
Yes, I am. It's one of my hot topics, something I love to talk about, networking.
Yes, well, and today's another hot topic.
It's hot, yeah.
So we want to actually invite all of you to give some feedback on today's topic as we begin the day. And before I introduce Bonnie, the question is, how do you feel about office politics? It's an open question, and we would invite you to go ahead and add your answer in the chat. So again, quickly, I want to introduce Bonnie Marcus. Bonnie is the author of The Politics of Promotion, How Women Get Ahead and Stay Ahead. It is brand new in paperback this year. Bonnie is also an avid runner and dancer. She is an executive coach and speaker, and she has such an amazing story, and hopefully we'll hear part of that today. So thanks to all of you who are putting some comments in. I see that Nicole loathes politics. Politics can be very challenging and toxic. It exists. It's a matter of learning how to work with it, Angel says. Lisa says, office politics, you must engage, learn the rules and play, no time to put your head in the sand. While Jennifer thinks that politics shouldn't be a part of any organizational culture. So it looks like we've got some mixed comments, some more people saying it can be a good thing, inevitable. What do you think about those responses so far, Bonnie?
Wow. Well, you know, I did a lot of research for this book. And I asked women what they felt about office politics, and I got to say, probably 99%. I can recall one woman who said it could be a good thing. But for the most part, it's evil, it's bad karma, it's a waste of time, you know. And so for the people who wrote that, that it could be a good thing, I kind of applaud that. I'd love to know more about that.
So hopefully today, as we continue through the content, we'll get some more input and insights from our attendees. And I know, Bonnie, you have quite a lot to share with us. And before we go any further, we did want to stop and ask a poll. We are so curious to hear from you. How political is your work environment? And hopefully you can see the poll on the Zoom panel. In the event that you can't, you can feel free to type your response. We have 3 responses available today: not at all political, somewhat political, or highly political. How political is your work environment? So we'll give you a few more moments to participate in the poll as we move ahead with today's content. Bonnie, do you have any predictions about how political people view their workplaces?
Well, of course, the safe bet is to say somewhat political, because that's the middle ground. But I do want to say that when I'm working with clients, very often I'll ask them this question in regard to, well, what does it really take to get ahead? What are some of the decisions, how do people make decisions in your organization about who gets promoted, et cetera? And can you rank politics in that? So I'll get anywhere from 50% politics, 50% performance, to 10% performance, 90% politics. Some people will throw in personality matters, but I'd love to see that percentage, because every workplace and every department has different politics.
Well, let's take.
It's interesting to see here.
Sure, I've put up those results for us. Only 7% of our attendees this afternoon or this morning or wherever you are in the world said, only 7% said not at all political. We do see in red, somewhat political was the most popular answer with 51% respondents, but 42% of the folks today say that their workplaces are highly political.
Yeah, so that's not surprising to me, because the reality is that politics is everywhere. That's the reality. How toxic it is obviously depends on your particular workplace. But anywhere where you have a couple of people, you're going to have politics. And before we opened up this call, we were talking about sororities. There are politics in our relationships outside of work. When you think about it and you go out for a girls' night out and there are 8 of you sitting around a table, well, who do you sit next to and who do you share some juicy gossip with? It's politics, because it's all about relationships and influence and power. So the question, the important thing is politics is everywhere. But what's really important, and somebody actually put this in the chat I saw, is learning to be politically savvy, learning how to navigate the politics that exist in your organization to position yourself successfully. That's the key, because politics is everywhere. That's the reality. So learning how to navigate and deal with it is really important. And that's why we're here today.
We sure are. So before we dive too deeply, because I know you want to set the stage by talking about a few key points, we do have a question from Erica, and she's asking, Bonnie, if you would define politics.
The way I define politics is really the dynamics, particularly in the workplace, the dynamics between people, and it's all about relationships. Who has power? Who has influence? What is acceptable? What isn't acceptable? How people, use that power. So it really has everything to do with relationships and the interaction of people.
That's really helpful. So, Bonnie, I know we were going to identify some key points related to this topic of navigating office politics to set the stage for today's conversation.
So it was a good start to talk about the reality that politics is there. Your workplace may not be that political, or maybe you're not paying really good attention to the politics, but it exists everywhere, as I said before. So what's really important is that you learn how to navigate and use office politics to position yourself so you're not blindsided. You can't avoid office politics. And what's really important to know is there isn't a career out there. You can't build a career in a vacuum. You need relationships and people. And so you need to understand the dynamics and pay attention to it because, you know, strike the drum. There's no such thing really as a meritocracy. I mean, we'd love to believe that our work alone will help us get ahead. It's important. It's important that you work hard and you've got great performance, but that isn't the only thing that's going to help you be successful. And, you know, before you were mentioning my story, and for those of you who've read my book, you may know this, but I was early in my career and I started at a company at an entry-level position and worked my way up to be an assistant vice president. And I had a great track record, and I was a top performer, and I won all the awards and went on all the trips. And the company reorganized, and where there wasn't a VP position before, the reorganization brought that position, and there was an opening. And so I immediately threw my hat in the ring because there wasn't anybody else more qualified in my territory. So I thought it was a shoo-in. You know, I just kept doing my work, but I also had a new boss that I had no relationship with, and he intimidated me, and I thought he was a bully, and I just didn't like him. So I just kept my head down, doing the work and out in the field with my direct reports. And, you know, long story short, I was totally blindsided, and they brought in a man from another territory to take that position. And I was like, what? You know, how could this happen? You know, but you know, hindsight's 2020. And I look back and I said, wow, I didn't know how the decision was going to be made. I didn't build relationship with my boss. I avoided him. I didn't know who was in his web of influence. I didn't really pay much attention to that at all. I just banked on my performance. And so I mean, I like to tell that story, and I certainly told that story in my book because I want everybody out there, all women who are talented and who deserve to be promoted, not to be blindsided. You really need to pay attention to what's going on around you. And you may hate it. You may think it's evil and manipulative, but it's really important to reframe it in a positive way, that it's about relationships, and that it is a skill, not a trait, and you can learn to be politically savvy for the benefit of your career without compromising your integrity, I might add, because that's a good point.
Well, let's talk a little bit more about that, Bonnie, that you're identifying that political savvy and navigating office politics is a skill that you can develop and not a trait that you have inherently. So as you say that, Bonnie, what I'm getting really curious about, does it come more naturally to some people than others? And, you know, what does it look like to develop that skill if it's something that we find that we're lacking? You know, I'd be curious for those of you who are listening, can you identify with Bonnie's telling of her story where she says, well, I just put my head down and did my work. You know, I was counting on the quality of my work performance to propel me to that leadership level. So if you can identify with that approach, you know, head down, do the work, go ahead and type yes in the chat. I'd love to hear from you.
Yeah, because I mean, that's our comfort zone. And really, that's what we can control. So yeah, we do the work. And plus the fact, most of us have a life outside of work, right? And so we do our work and we go home, and then we've got a whole other set of things that we are responsible for. We don't want to really get involved, and we don't want to drain our energy with it. But unfortunately, it's just really important that you do pay attention to what's going on and how decisions are made regarding your career. So I'm not saying you don't have to work hard or you don't have to have great performance. You need to do it all. I know, you know.
Yeah, that kind of stinks. So there's some interesting comments. One attendee said, yes, all the time, and it's not getting me anywhere. Laura says, the days of getting ahead by working hard are over. Lisa says, we are all socialized as women to keep our head down and our mouths shut. Ouch. Don't complain, and at all costs, don't boast about your accomplishments.
Okay, and we'll talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, I think we will. So can
To
we,
get to your question,
yes, please.
I think that some people are naturally more tuned in, self-aware of what's going on around them. I think some people are more likely to engage in different relationships and feel comfortable with it. Maybe introverts are more shy about engaging in relationships with people that they don't know, which of course is, part of building the relationships that count. But you can learn it. And the first thing is to reframe it, to understand it's important for your career, it's necessary, and then to also understand that there are ways that you can learn to be politically savvy that are going to help you be successful. And that's why I created the political toolkit in the book.
Got it. And I know for folks who want to learn more and read about the tools, the book is the best place to get that info.
Right. And just really quickly, there are 5 tools. One is, how do you learn how to advocate for yourself without boasting and bragging and without the backlash. So that's one tool called the mirror. The other, the magnifying glass, is really what you need to pay attention to in the workplace. The other one is around strategic networking, which is our next webinar. How do you build a strategic networking? What does that look like? The next is, how do you find a sponsor? How do you be sponsor ready? And then the last one is the GPS, which is, working with a coach or a mentor to understand how all the tools work.
Got it. So Bonnie, for those who might be listening who, despite hearing that they're not going to get ahead purely by working hard, what can we do to overcome the resistance that we might feel to dealing with office politics? I know, I own my own company, so it's a little bit different, but just hearing about the need to pay attention to politics makes me tired. Like thinking about, navigating, gossip or back channel communication, or feeling like you have to put yourself forward. It sounds like an exhausting endeavor to me. So how can we overcome that resistance that we might feel to engaging in office politics?
We have to think of it in a positive way, that it is, if you are ambitious and you really want your career to move forward, that outside of doing great work, you need to pay attention, build relationships, and understand the dynamics in your workplace. And I know we're going to talk a little bit more about what we need to pay attention to, but you can be an observer. People will say to me, well, if I'm brand new to the company, doesn't that put me at a disadvantage? And I'm like, no. Actually, it could be an advantage, because you can be the observer and really see what's going on and understand some of these relationships and who has power and who doesn't have power, just by watching, observing people in meetings. So it's an important thing to do. And just like, yeah, I got to work hard. Yeah, sometimes I have to work overtime. Sometimes I have to put in extra work. You also need to open your eyes and ears.
That makes sense. So we do have a question from an attendee wondering, Bonnie, if you can talk a little bit about office politics against people of color. And then there's another comment here about people maybe of an older generation. So two comments, you know, what about people of color? What about people who might be older?
In terms of
how office politics might affect them and what they might do.
Yeah, well, first of all, office politics affects everybody. And this is that, that brings up a really great point. It's, whether you're a woman of color or whether you're an older woman in the workplace, it's important for you to understand how the culture of your organization works in regard to your specific position. Mm-hmm. So when you look around, are women of color getting ahead? What does it take to get ahead? And are you at a disadvantage where you're working because of it? Who would support you? Who would be your ally and champion? And this goes for, older women. This goes for any group, right? Based on sexual orientation or gender or religion or race. You need to understand how you fit into that culture and really who could be your ally and champion, who could support you. Mm-hmm. And it's different, right? It's different for every department. So you could move to a different department and everything's different. What it takes to get ahead, the rules are different. So that's why it's really important to pay attention to how that affects you. It's who you are.
That makes sense. So for those of you who had questions, feel free to post any follow-ups. We want to make sure that we're addressing your concerns. But Bonnie, let's move on and talk about some strategic tips for navigating workplace politics. I know you have mentioned to me that there are some things that we need to pay attention to in the workplace.
Right. And in my book, I use the symbol, the magnifying glass, because it reminds us that we really have to pay attention and really look under the covers, is what I really like to say. So the first thing is, what are the rules? And by rules, I really mean policies. So you can look at your employee handbook and you can see what some of the regular policies are. Mm-hmm. But then it's really important to look under the covers and say, but what's reality? What are some of the unwritten rules? So I give a very simple example is you have a new job, you're really excited, you show up at work at 9 o'clock, all excited to get to it, and you look around and like everybody's been there since at least 7:30 in the morning. And they stay till like 7:30 at night. Well, if you look in the employee handbook, it's a 9 to 5 job. But when you look under the covers, what's the unwritten rule? And maybe in this department, under this leader, the unwritten rule is you need to show up about 90 minutes before he or she arrives and stay 90 minutes after they leave. Now, it's not a formal rule, if you don't comply, will you get fired? Probably not. But here's the key to this simple example. Mm-hmm. If you want to position yourself successfully with this particular leader, does it make sense for you to comply to that rule? And then the next thing is that rule sacred, right? How important is that unwritten rule? So this is really important to figure out in your department, in your organization, what are some of these unwritten rules and which of them are sacred? If I break that rule, like, whoa, I'm going to be on the outs. It's going to be really hard for me to get a raise, really hard for me to get ahead if I break that rule. So that's an example of that particular rule, of that particular thing to pay attention to. The next thing to pay attention to is who has power and influence. And who has power and influence over your career? So, we like to look at the org chart and say, oh, all the people at the top, at the C-level, all those people, they have all the power. And everybody underneath, as you go down the different layers, we lose power the further you go down in the org chart. And once you use your magnifying glass and you really look at the situation, that's not necessarily so. Because there are people who have influence and therefore power who aren't necessarily in the C-suite or have that title. So it's your responsibility to figure out what those dynamics are. Who makes decisions about your career? So say it's your boss. Okay. Now, who is in your boss's web of influence? Who does your boss hang out with? Who does he call on in meetings? Who does he go out with, for drinks afterward? Who influences his or her decision? Because you need to build visibility and credibility with all those people. They all need to know about you and your work and the results that you get. So understanding who has power and influence is the second thing. And then the third thing we touched on a little bit, it's what's the culture? What's acceptable? What isn't acceptable? So what kind of behavior is acceptable? What isn't? And is it different for a woman than a man? And I'd be curious if we asked in the chat whether we find that in your culture, do you find that there are different standards for behavior because you're a woman versus a man? And in particular, what does it take in your culture to get ahead? And is that different for a woman than it is for a man? Is that different for a woman of color than a Caucasian woman, a Latino woman? The reality is important. So here's my point. It's not what we hope it is, what we wish it is, what we'd like it to be. Like, oh, I'm going to do really good work, and it doesn't matter that I'm, a man or a woman. It doesn't matter that I'm a woman of color. I'm still going to get those opportunities. You need to know, idealism aside, what is the truth? And you do that by paying attention to the dynamic. You look at, okay, is there a woman who's made it to a leadership position? Right? So who does she have relationships with? What kind of work, what kind of projects is she on? How does she communicate? How does she behave in meetings? How does she advocate for herself? What kind of relationships does he have? So you can look at somebody who has actually made it in that culture, in that environment, and see what it really takes. And chances are she has some pretty strong relationships along with great work.
That's really helpful. So a question that came in just a few minutes ago was, is it possible after many years in an organization not paying attention to politics to turn it around? Or is it better to start over at a new company where you can have the chance to watch from the beginning?
Oh, no, it's never too late. Because, any company I've been in, there are changes all the time. New leaders come in and they bring their whole team in, and their mergers and acquisitions, and things change all the time. And so it starts fresh, even though you may be in the same company. And when that happens, it's really important when the players change, and they always change. How does that influence the culture, the unwritten rules, and the power and influence?
So I hope that was helpful for the person who answered or asked the question. So Bonnie, it sounds like when we start to pay attention, we're paying attention to the written and unwritten rules, really being able to identify, is there some set of unknown standards that people are living to. We want to pay attention to the people who have power over our career and the connections that they have. And we want to pay attention to the culture and what's acceptable and what isn't. So I know we wanted to pause again and take another poll. It's a fun one. And this poll asks you about what you think it takes to get ahead where you are. And the choices are work effort, performance, personality, likability, relationships, and other. And please feel free, if you have an other, to go ahead and type that in the chat. So we hope that you'll take a moment to answer our poll. What does it take to get ahead where you are? And we'll give you a few moments to answer.
And they can check more than one, right?
Yes, I believe they can.
Right. Right.
So let's see. And so I do see quite a few others. So for those of you who are selecting other, we'd love to hear what the other is that you're thinking of when you click other amongst your choices. And we'll give this just a few more seconds. About half of you have answered. So Megan says, what should it take? Work, effort, and delivery. What does it take? Personality and likability. An earlier comment from Catherine, I suspect that for the most part, there are different standards between men and women, and especially racially diverse women. And then there's the whole white male privilege at play. Huh.
Yeah.
Other means job availability. So it takes a job to be available to get ahead. Dawn says other means someone dies or leaves.
You know, Becky, I was doing an interview with a podcast in the UK yesterday, and one of the first questions she asked me is why I wrote this just for women. Because politics is for everybody, right? And my answer was this: it's because we still live in a patriarchy. So to the point that somebody just brought up about white men, they are still in the C-suite. And they still have all the power and influence over our careers. And I wrote this for women because we need to know how to navigate, how to get access to what we used to call the boys club, right? Some of these power networks where decisions are made about our careers. And when you can figure that out through paying attention in politics and building relationships, you know, that's a win.
Yeah, I agree. So let's take a look at these results. It looks like 75% of you think that it takes relationships to get ahead. Personality and likability is second, performance is third, then work effort and other.
Do we have others?
I mean, the others that people typed in were related to there's a job available, someone died or left. Let's see, this person said to appease the people in your department or less on other departments. I'm not quite sure what that means. So not too many people giving us a reason for it, not a reason, like clarification on what they meant on other.
Those sound like politics though.
Well, yes. I mean, I think that absent, you know, obviously if there's no position to raise to, then you can't get ahead.
Yeah.
But in a place where there is a career ladder to follow or positions to aspire to, certainly it seems like the common experience here is that relationships matter most.
Yeah. So this was a great exercise because for all of you who are attending this, you know, maybe you never thought about this before. You know, what does it really take to get ahead here? And a lot of you, I don't remember what you put up there, a lot of you did not select performance as the top thing. So, eye-opener, you know. If you selected relationships, then that's what you need to really pay attention to. is who are the relationships, the workplace relationships, what are they, which are the ones that really count? Who has power and influence over my career? And how can I develop and nurture relationships that will help me get more credibility and visibility?
That's really wise. So I have a couple of questions that have come in, Bonnie. Carol is wondering how you get invited to the boys' poker game or golf game or whatever game happens that women are not invited to.
Okay. Actually, I have a story about that. We have time to share that?
Yes.
One of my former clients was working in financial services. Actually, she was on the trading floor. All men. Her boss was a man. And she had a great relationship with her boss. But, and she got along with everybody, but she was the only woman on the trading floor. I mean, the only woman. And one day she found out that her boss had organized this fishing trip. And she wasn't invited. So she had a great relationship with her boss, and she went up to him and she said, "Hey, if you knew I like to fish, would you have invited me?" And he said, "No, it's a guy thing." I often use that in my workshops as a table exercise so that women can brainstorm about how to deal with that. But the fact of the matter is, and I guess the point I want to make is, you may never be invited to the poker game. I guess my question is, do you really want to go? Or the golf game. But you still need to build relationships with everybody who's around that poker table. And you can do it one-on-one. And it's probably even more effective, is to figure out who's in that boys club and begin to schedule a coffee or a meeting, just to get to know them better or what they're working on. That way you may get invited. You could express an interest to get invited, but if you're not going to be invited, that's not an excuse for not building these relationships.
That's really helpful. And someone here said, love that, host your own game.
Yeah.
And another comment is, there are other ways to get along and be a good influence, and the men don't want the women to be men. So good point there.
The point is, when you're talking about politics, and, this is what is, really annoying, that, yeah, it's a poker game, or yeah, it's a golf game, but we know darn well that they discuss business. And when we're not at the table and we're not on the golf course, we miss out on that. And they could be talking about, wow, there's an opening or this great client project, who do you think we should put on that? And you're not there to say, me,
pick me. Yeah.
So that's why it's even more important that you build relationships with everybody who is there so that they can champion you if you're not there and say, hey, I think Becky would be a great fit on that project. I think, and so that's why it's important to look at who is in that whole web and begin to build one-on-one relationships if you're not going to go to the poker game. I like the idea of creating your own event as well. So.
Yeah, well, I can tell by all the comments in the chat that this is definitely a topic that's stirring people to thinking, and emotion. There are emotions that are being triggered here, and thinking about people's experience. So thank you for the many comments. It's probably not possible for us to get to every single comment, but I do want to take this question that came in a little earlier. Megan wants to know, what can you do when your sponsor is powerful and doing all they can, but has their own challenges in building the right relationships? And she said, in this case, it's a glass ceiling issue. So any suggestions on, you have a sponsor, but the sponsor can't quite help you get through that glass ceiling?
Find another sponsor. So one of the things to look for, and again, there's a whole chapter in the book on sponsorship, is, who makes a really good sponsor? And a sponsor isn't somebody who just has the willingness. They have the power. and the ability to create opportunities for you. So when you're looking for a sponsor, you need to find somebody who's got that power and that ability, along with the willingness to create opportunities for you.